I'm very excited to introduce Wendy Sax, who is a board member for one of our partner organizations, Plant Powered Metro New York, and a New York-based documentary filmmaker. Welcome, Wendy.
Thanks so much, Nikki, and welcome everyone. It's really lovely to see some familiar names in the chat, and just welcome everyone who's here. It's quite a fun and celebratory night. I'll tell you a tiny bit about Plant Powered Metro New York. As Nikki mentioned, we're partnering with the JCC and presenting many of the educational courses together. Plant Powered Metro New York empowers people to find better health and overcome chronic disease through whole food, plant-based nutrition. And with a food is medicine approach, we offer education, build supportive communities, empower people to make lifestyle adjustments, and organize and lead projects that spark changes to food policy, practice, and culture. And I couldn't be more honored tonight to introduce my dear friend and celebrity chef and educator, the beloved Chef AJ. Chef AJ, as you'll find out, has a daily show on Facebook Live, and really a treat to listen to her show and the guests she herself has on. I just realized I have the wrong script up, so I'm going to read from a piece of paper. Bear with me just 1 second. Bio on Chef AJ. Chef AJ has been devoted to a plant-exclusive diet for over 40 years, which she credits with helping her lose 100 pounds. A popular vegan chef, she's hosted the television series Healthy Living with Chef AJ, and currently curates and hosts a daily broadcast on Facebook Live and YouTube. She served as executive pastry chef at Santé restaurant in Los Angeles, where she was famous for her sugar, oil, salt, and gluten-free desserts. A comedian as well as a chef, she's made many appearances on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, Tonight Show with Jay Leno, The Late Show with David Letterman, and more. She's the author of a wonderful book called Unprocessed, How to Achieve Vibrant Health, and also a book more recent, Your Ideal Weight and the Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss, sorry, misreading. A revolutionary approach to conquer cravings, overcome food addiction, and lose weight without going hungry. And her latest book, Own Your Own Health, was released in October 2020. So tonight we have a real treat because, as we know, this is a holiday of dairy and milk and honey, and we're doing it non-dairy. So Chef AJ, take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Wendy. Just a slight thing, it was 50 pounds. I just don't want people to think that, but that's still pretty good, right?
Very good. Yes, I was reading.
That's okay. No, but I just don't want to I want to be at full transparency, but thank you so much for having me. And yes, I'm going to make a delicious strawberry chocolate cheesecake sweetened with the whole fruit and nothing but the whole fruit. So help me. And I'll get started right away. It's not a very complicated recipe. And what I love about this recipe is you don't even need to preheat your oven because it's technically a raw dessert, which is great, especially with summer coming up. I live in the Palm Springs area. It's very hot and it's actually very easy to make without that many ingredients. We're going to start with the crust first. And as you mentioned, everything I do is gluten-free. And it's not just because I'm gluten-free, but I just figure people that are not gluten-free can eat a gluten-free dessert, whereas not the other way around. So why not do that? Especially because instead of flour, I'm using nuts, which I think are much healthier anyway, and a whole food. The pan I'm using today is called a springform pan, and this one happens to have a glass bottom and a silicone ring, but they come in metal, and you can really get them in all different shapes and sizes now. I'm just doing the traditional round shape, and if you don't want to have to clean the bottom, you can line it with a piece of parchment paper, and then you have one less thing to clean. So you're going to need one tool for this, which is a food processor. I'm actually using the Nutri-Milk, which is very powerful, but just a standard Cuisinart would be fine. I always measure all my ingredients in advance. That's called mise en place. That makes all recipes go much more quickly. So the crust basically has two ingredients, almonds and dates. And so you can buy almonds already ground into a flour-like consistency now. At Trader Joe's, it's called almond meal. At other stores, it's called almond flour. And I have 2 cups. You can actually make this yourself just from whole almonds, but it is much finer when you buy it already ground. And then I'm going to add 12 ounces of dates. I was a pastry chef in a restaurant for 5 years, and we do everything by weight. Everything, because then it's completely accurate. But if you don't want to get an inexpensive food scale, 12 ounces of dates, and of course, pitted dates would be approximately 2 fully packed cups. And so then I'm going to add this to the nuts. And if for some reason you had a nut allergy, you could certainly use oats instead, or you could use a different nut if you wanted to. You know, you could use hazelnut would be very good. You could use walnut, but almond is just one that I always seem to have on hand. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to process this with the S blade. You should probably sing a song here. If it was Passover, we could sing Steady on, so, but it's not, it's the wrong holiday. But this will take about a minute to 2, depending on your food processor. What we're trying to do is incorporate that into sort of like a dough, which will be a little bit sticky from the dates. Always make sure your dates are pitted. I use the Deglet Nor, the organic ones, just because they're a little bit less expensive than the Medjool, but the Medjool will be absolutely fine. You just want to make sure that they are pitted. And if you were going to use whole nuts instead of the almond meal or almond flour, you would want to grind that into a flour-like consistency before adding the dates. And so if you've ever heard of a confection that they sell everywhere from Trader Joe's to Costco called a flour bar, that's basically what I'm doing for my crust. It's literally 2 ingredients, dates and nuts. You can add a little vanilla if you have it. Vanilla powder is what I prefer to use, but I didn't add it this time. It will be fine. And this can make the quickest and easiest pie crust. Most pie crusts are made out of things like shortening or lard, butter, or Crisco, or oil, which is not very healthy, and also calorically dense in flour. But what I like about my recipes is they're actually made out of food and not processed ingredients. So you can see this is starting to slow down a little bit, and pretty soon it's going to be just at the perfect consistency for a crust. And again, everybody's food processor is different. If you have one that is less powerful, it may take a few more minutes, but usually I've done this enough to know that about 2 minutes is about what it takes. If at the end of the processing it doesn't stick together, then what you'll want to do is add a few more dates. But I can already hear that it's slowing down. And this is probably like the longest part of what we're going to do today. And then when it finishes processing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze a little bit of the batter together like this with my clean hands. And if I can form a ball like this and then break the ball and it doesn't crumble, it's ready. I call that the break point. And so now all I do is simply dump this into my pan. And if you ever have to make a dessert the last minute for company, you can do this really easily. And then you could even just slice fruit on top, but this is so great. This is a raw, vegan, gluten-free pie crust made out of 2 whole natural foods. And you can, if we weren't making a strawberry chocolate cheesecake, we could flavor this any way. We could put in lemon zest, lime zest, orange zest, depending on what we were making, even some cocoa powder. But we're trying to simulate sort of like a graham cracker crust because that is traditional with a lot of cheesecakes. That's why I'm not putting any chocolate in. So I'm just using my hand to press this down nice and evenly, and we're not going to cook this. We don't have to. And there we have it. So there we have the crust. And so now it's time to make the filling. So the filling has a few different ingredients, and I'll start putting them in one at a time. It calls for a box of tofu, and I like to use the Morinu silken tofu. So if you're doing savory dishes like stir fries, any kind of tofu, water packed is fine. But for desserts, I think it's better to use the tofu that comes in these aseptic cartons. It's called silken tofu because it's very creamy. And I like to get the extra firm, but if you can't find the extra firm, it's okay to use any kind you want, but I would prefer that you use a silken tofu, which is often found on the shelves. It doesn't have to be refrigerated because it's shelf stable for a very, very long time. And then a cup of non-dairy cream cheese. There are so many brands now that you can get at almost every store, even the regular grocery store. Sometimes they're made out of nuts, sometimes they're made out of soy, all different kinds. You can even make them yourself. I've done it myself fairly easily just by taking some probiotic in almonds, but now that it's widely available, I usually just buy it. So we do have our non-dairy cream cheese. And then we're going to add some cocoa powder, 1/2 cup. And the cocoa powder I'm using, believe it or not, is Hershey's. This is a very inexpensive brand from the regular grocery store, but it's the special dark. It's really, really good. I like the color. It makes it nice and rich, but you can also use any kind of organic cacao, whatever you like. I always say get the one you like the best or the best you can afford. Now, before I process this, I need to come over to the stove and melt some chocolate. And the chocolate that I'm using is 100% cacao. So what, saying it's sugar-free, it'd probably be more accurate to say it's refined sugar-free, because I am using dates and date syrup. But the thing about date syrup is it's literally made out of only dates. The chocolate I'm using, you can get at many stores. Now, this happens to be from Trader Joe's. It has no sugar, it has no dairy. It is literally the whole chocolate. So it's not sweet, but it's very good. So I have it already in my little pan here, and I'm going to add some date syrup. This brand that I love is organic, and it's called I Love Date Lady. I'm actually going to turn my heat on. There we go. Now, and then I'm going to add my date syrup. Date syrup is much more widely available now than it was years ago. You can get it not only on Amazon, but in many grocery stores. If you buy it from the company website, which is I Love Date Lady, and you use my name, Chef AJ, they'll give you a 10% discount. And then we're going to add that. What I like about date syrup is I can make it in my own kitchen. I don't anymore now that I can buy it commercially, but you can. So one of the things about melting chocolate, it's probably, if you're not somebody used to doing it, it's probably safer to do it over a double boiler. But since this is something I have literally done as a profession for years, I'm comfortable doing it on the stove. But you can never walk away from melted chocolate, because once you burn it, you can't go back. You can't use it. You have to throw it out. So you have to really watch it, stir it, because it melts very, very quickly. You want it nice and smooth and creamy. And it won't take very long. If you prefer a sweeter, I don't know why this would need to be any sweeter, but you can get vegan or non-dairy chocolate chips that are sweetened with sugar. You can get them sweetened now with stevia. I've seen them with monk fruit, but I just use the pure ones that have absolutely no sweetener. One of the things I recommend when you buy any chocolate is make sure that chocolate is the first ingredient, not any of these sugars or artificial sweeteners. You can see this did not take very long. If you were to use another liquid sweetener, like say agave or maple syrup, it would be very, very sweet, because date syrup is sweet, but it's not, I don't think, as sickly sweet as some of those other sweeteners. So we're just going to, the nice thing about growing up Orthodox Jewish and kosher is I never had milk chocolate. I did have it when I was much older, and I didn't like it because I don't think it tastes good. It's just too sweet. A real connoisseur knows that the only good chocolate is dark chocolate. And that's what we're using. This is 100%. So you can see, look how creamy this is. It did not take very long. I'm going to turn my oven off, and I'm going to walk back over to my food processor. And then I'm going to add the melted chocolate to the food processor very carefully, because it's hot. Oh, it's so luscious. The nice thing about vegan desserts or whole food plant-based desserts, and this is why I was able to work at a non-vegan restaurant, is people don't enjoy desserts because of the egg that might be in there or the dairy. They enjoy them because they're sweet, and you can get sweetness without sugar, is using, as I say, the fruit, the whole fruit, and nothing but the whole fruit. So now I'm going to process this mixture using the same food processor for probably about a minute.
AJ, a quick question.
Sure.
Two quick questions, actually. Can oat flour be used instead of almond?
Yeah, absolutely. You can. It would lower the fat quite considerably. So yes, absolutely you can. It won't be quite as rich, but I think it would be absolutely fine. That's usually what I do. If I'm going to eat a dessert, I try to do things a little bit lower in fat, so I always use oats. Awesome. I usually use them whole just because I'm kind of cheap, and when you buy oat flour, it's a lot more expensive than when you buy just rolled oats.
Excellent. And can anything be used instead of dates?
Well, yes, but it won't taste the same. You see, dates are very, very neutral. So when you say instead of, I'm thinking another dried fruit could be used for that stickiness, because see, the dates are not only my sugar in this recipe, but the glue. Unless you're allergic to dates, maybe figs would probably be my second choice. But when you get into other dried fruits like raisins, cherries, apricots, they have a more distinct taste, and the crust is not supposed to be the part that you really taste. It's supposed to be kind of neutral. So look, that was only 1 minute. It's already done. Now, what's inside could actually be a dessert unto itself. It could be like a mousse, if you will. But we're going to put this in. Oh, this is so amazing.
That looks
I love
great.
this.
Can you use the Vitamix instead of the food processor?
You know, it's funny that you say that on Today of All Days, because the show that I do every day, which is actually on YouTube, I interviewed the guy that knows more about blenders and food processors than anybody else, John Kohler. And he was saying that he doesn't recommend any blenders for recipes that don't have liquids. So in other words, I would say no, because blenders are really more to liquefy things like smoothies, and there really is no liquid in this. So you don't have to use the Nutrimilk, but my recommendation is to use some kind of a food processor, because you really kind of burn out the motor when you're doing things that doesn't have liquid. Now I want to show you a little trick. There's a lot of filling left on the bottom, and I don't want to spend all day trying to get it out. So what I'm going to do, this is an old trick I learned from my sister-in-law, Lauren, in Pittsburgh, is to get that last bit out based on something called centrifugal force. All I do is just very quickly whiz it once. And now my blade, which was completely covered with mousse, is basically clear, which is great. So that now I can get every last bit. So whether you're doing hummus in a food processor or some kind of a dessert, just by putting it back on for just a quick second, now I'm going to be able to get all that filling. And that's a lot. Look how much I would have left if I had not done that. And you don't want to waste that, because that is pure gold. What's nice is there's no heating. You don't have to bake it, and it doesn't take that long to set up in your refrigerator. I would say, a few hours to overnight, so that it's firm enough to cut. I can't seem to find my offset spatula in the house, so I'm just going to use a regular old knife to smooth it out. And then I'm going to cover it with strawberries. And you can see there's not very many ingredients in this recipe, and they are ones you can get pretty much anywhere, especially if you live in the city. Definitely everything pretty much can be got at Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, Sprouts. So I'm just going to spread that on. And then I'm going to cover it with strawberries. And then I buy a 2-pound box of organic strawberries. And I like to make this recipe when strawberries are in season, because then they're bright red and they're very sweet, and they tend to be bigger. So I like using the biggest ones I can find. And then all I do is I cut the stems off. And I'm going to show you how I decorate the top. So I look for the bright red ones that are as big as possible. And then if I see one that's really, really big like this one, I'm going to just put that in the middle and kind of push it down. And then I'm going to take the other berries and this is just so pretty, the presentation. I'm going to do an extra step and drizzle some melted chocolate on it. But honestly, if you kept it naked like this, it would still be beautiful. It would still be delicious. But we're going to go all out for the holiday. And again, we just press it around. This is something you could get the kids involved with. I think they could do this part safely if they just promise not to eat it until it's all decorated. And again, it's amazing, like when you think how long it takes to bake a cake, and I love raw desserts for the reason that they're just so easy to make. The culinary school I went to was raw. So I guess that's where I got my love for the raw desserts, but I like things that are very pretty, and this one's very pretty. And if there's little holes there, you can just kind of move it around. It's not set in stone. I try to get in as much fruit as I can in my desserts. And then if you have a few berries left, you can eat them, of course. Now, this isn't necessary for this cake, but as long as I've got you here, I just want to show you since they always say you eat with your eyes, one thing I always recommend, like it's really pretty to garnish food. And I just want to show you how easy it is to make a strawberry fan. When you're making a strawberry fan, it's best if you get like a little tiny paring knife rather than a big chef's knife. And you always want to look for a berry that's kind of even and round and one that has the stem intact. And then to make a strawberry fan, you're just going to make little cuts, not all the way up, but almost all the way up, all the way through, as thin as you can. There's also a way to make strawberry roses. Wendy, I know you know Chef Ramses Bravo, and he actually did a wonderful video showing how to make, on Mother's Day, how to make strawberries into roses and put them on skewers.
Knack for creating the most beautiful presentations.
Yeah, and then you just kind of, you push it. You push it. Oop, did I not make a little, oh, I didn't make another one here. So you just kind of push it with your hand, you fan it out. And so if we were serving this as a mousse, for example, that would be, oh, it could use another one here. There we go. So again, if we were serving this like in a goblet as a mousse, we would just fan it out like this. Actually, we could get 2 out of these. So that's just a little something extra for fun. And now let me show you how to make the topping that we're going to drizzle over the top. So we're going to go back to the stove. And this time we are going to put, I'm just putting the oven on, not the oven, the burner on again. And then I'm going to add a 2-ounce, 100% chocolate bar. I'll show you the brand. It's called Guittard. It's one of the fine chocolate brands. And to that, I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of my date syrup and a 1/2 cup of non-dairy milk, your choice. And I'm just putting that. And again, if you're not somebody familiar with melting chocolate, I would recommend getting a double boiler. You know, like they say, don't try this at home if you haven't tried it, but I'm too lazy to boil water. And plus, you know, you could ostensibly melt chocolate in your microwave, but you got to be very, very careful. This is a nonstick pan. If you're not comfortable with nonstick, then use a stainless steel. It would be fine. This shouldn't take too long to melt. I'm using medium heat.
AJ,
yeah. Oh,
sorry, do you have a favorite nonstick brand pan that you use?
Yeah, I do. Well, you know, believe it or not, like 30 years ago, I was a Pampered Chef consultant, and I still have 2 of their nonstick pans. And I know I get criticized a lot on YouTube because supposedly they're dangerous. My pans have worked great. They've never chipped. You know, I know that there's other brands now that people like. I've heard that Mary McDougall likes something called the Scan pan. I've heard something called a green pan. They have ceramic pans, Copper Chefs. You know, True North uses the stainless steel cookware. A lot of people use what's called waterless cookware, but I'm not going to go out and buy a new pan when what I have is fine. So that's what I use. What I wanted to say is the chocolate chips that I used for the filling, I could absolutely use for this little topping too. I would just use 2 ounces, but since these little chocolate bars come in 2 ounces, I just figured why not get that? It's easier. So I'm melting that.
Awesome.
And there it is. Very quick. Okay, we're done. So we're going to go back to the island.
At the end, when we have time, unless you can think 2 things at once, we have a request for a recipe for the non-dairy cream cheese, unless that can be found on the site.
Well, I'll tell you the one that I've used. I also want to say, since I did this so quickly, if you want, I can do a second recipe right after. I prepped for it just in case. Okay. And so now I have my melted chocolate, and then I just drizzle it over the strawberries. When I do this in the sink, you wouldn't be able to see me. That makes it less messy. And then I sometimes just take a fork and I flick it everywhere. and then basically I'm just going to put this in the refrigerator and let it set up. And as luck would have it, there is somebody coming over tomorrow named Robert Cheek, who is one of the wonderful plant-based athletes, to shoot some videos, and he can eat this because it happens to be Dr. John McDougall's birthday. And I'm going to pretend I made it for him when he's on my show tomorrow, even though he won't be able to eat it. So you can put as much or as little as you like, depending. Probably could have used half as much chocolate, but.
Something tells me chocolate never goes to waste.
No, it smells so good.
I can imagine.
You know, I live in a 55 and older community near Palm Springs, and really nobody here is vegan, but I'll tell you, they love this dessert because people love this. And that's what we're going to do. So as I finish doing this, I'm going to just tell you the recipe I'm going to make next. It's a very quick and easy one, and it is what I call a guilt-free frappuccino. So if you like those ice blended mocha type drinks that you can get at Starbucks or Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, I have got a recipe for you. We're going to recreate the same texture and the same flavor, but without the caffeine and without the sugar. And this is my husband, Charles, who's helping me right now, one of his favorite beverages. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just switch equipment for a minute. And for this, we are going to use the Vitamix because we do need a blender for this.
How do you serve the cheesecake? Do you serve it? Oh, go ahead.
How do I serve it? Like on a plate? What do you mean, how do I serve it?
It's one of the questions that came up in the chat. Is there, I assume you just slice it the way you would any pie.
Yeah. So after it sets up, what I'm going to do is then, you don't want to do it just yet. You're going to lift up this little ring, remove the outer ring, and then I slice it. And I would say you get at least 12 slices out of this. This is very, very, very rich. So I'm going to pop this in the refrigerator. Actually, there's no room in my refrigerator. So I'm not going to pop it in the fridge. But I'm going to show you the next recipe, which is a variation of a recipe from my last book, which is called Own Your Health. And there is a recipe in there called the Desert Date Shake. In the desert, they make date shakes. You might be familiar with a place called Hadley's that finally has started making them without dairy. I don't know what took them so long, because even if people aren't vegan, it's one of the number one. There's 8 top allergens, and dairy is one of them. We all know dairy's not good for us. The only milk you should be drinking is from your mother. So date shakes are very popular in the desert, but they tend to have a lot of dairy and a lot of sugar. So I'm going to make one with both. Also, they can be quite expensive. They can be like $10 for just like I don't know, this much of a shake. And my husband was buying them every day. I'm like, that's ridiculous. So I tasted it and I reverse engineered it. And it's very good, but it's very, very sweet. Too sweet for me, in fact. So I started putting in a coffee-like substance. And by that, I mean, we're a caffeine-free household. If you used coffee, you could probably do that. But they have these wonderful herbal blends that taste just like coffee. So one of them is called Dandy Blend, and it's gluten-free. And it's made, I don't know why it's gluten-free when it says it's made out of barley, but the company swears it is. It's dandelion root. Or if you're worried about that, Say Me Tea, who makes caffeine-free green tea, makes a dark roast, and literally it's made out of brown rice. Both of these are excellent in flavor. This one has a slight chocolatey flavor. And so to make the shake, I start with 1 cup of non-dairy milk of your choice. I measured mine out in advance. Some dates. These are now for this I will use the Medjool, the more expensive ones, because they tend to be sweeter. And 3 or 4. It just depends how sweet you want it. So my husband likes it a little sweeter, so I'm going to use 4 for him. 3 would be enough for me, maybe even 2. So we'll put those 4 dates in there. And then the spices. So if you're going to make a recipe more than once in your life, I recommend you measure everything out in advance. So we have these fairly frequently. And so what I do is I take 12 jars. And by the way, these jars are just jars that you get when you have spices, and then you wash them in the dishwasher. The label comes off, or you can buy them for 69 cents at Bed Bath & Beyond. And I have these little jar parties where I just measure out, like, assembly style, all the spices that are in here. And what's in here is vanilla powder, nutmeg, cinnamon, oats, chia seeds. And the vanilla powder is really important. It's so much better than vanilla extract. Once you try vanilla powder, yes, it's expensive. Dr. Furman actually sells one on his website. You don't need a lot, but it's so much better than extract, which either has alcohol or sugar. It's just the pure ground up vanilla bean. So I'm going to add my spices. to that. And since we are going to do the coffee flavored one, we will add some of the Dandy blend, and you can do 1 to 2 tablespoons. It really depends how strong of a coffee flavor you like, how much of this you add, or none if you don't like coffee flavors, but it's fun having something that's coffee flavored that has no caffeine. And then 2 bananas that are frozen. Make sure they're ripe before you freeze them, and make sure you peel them before you freeze them. And for this, a Vitamix is a very good choice. You wouldn't want to do a smoothie in a food processor. So I think Zoom now does mute us. I'm not sure, so I'm going to have to blend. So hold your ears if it doesn't. Now, you can see how thick and yummy it is. Now, if it isn't thick enough, what I like to do is sometimes add ice. Always use a glass straw. Got to think about the environment. This smells so good. It's so thick and rich. Oops, look at that. Banana chunk. Sorry, that's what happens when I try to rush. Back to the drawing board. We want it thick, but we don't want a chunk in it. All right, there we go. Try again. Oh, it smells good. We had this last night. It can be very hot in the desert. So there we go. And it's like having a milkshake, really. So we're going to give that one to Charles. And I'm not going to drink right now. So I'm going to show you what you can do. This makes 2 servings like this. So even if I didn't have leftovers, a really fun thing to do with this is to make popsicles. And I have these in my freezer. So I have this little popsicle mold that I got on Amazon and a little funnel. I'm going to just put that down a little bit. Can we see it? And then what I do is I fill these with the mixture. I have a bunch in my freezer now. It's so good when it's frozen. It's like a fudgicle, actually, but healthier. If I didn't take a serving away for drinking, this would probably make all 10. So I just take the leftovers. A very little ingenious tool. Right now it's only going to make 2 because
It's such a great idea, especially in the summertime.
oh, tell me about it. So then you take the little top and you put it over the top. And then it comes with 50 sticks. When I ran out, I ordered literally a box of 5,000,
Oh my God.
which will probably last me my life. And don't ask me why, but 5,000 was cheaper than 50. So I've been sharing this with friends who also have this. And so then you just stick it in, and then you stick it in your freezer overnight. And I'll show you what they look like when they come out. Yeah, it's got a little bit of ice burn on it, but you can see these are so, so good. And so there we have dairy-free and delicious. And look at it, took me really no time to make either of these recipes.
That looks absolutely amazing. And the good news is we have a bunch of questions in the chat. So I will start asking you some of those questions.
Sure.
That's amazing to me how quickly you put it together, particularly the cheesecake. I mean, if I think of making cheesecake, particularly for this holiday, I feel like the whole kitchen would be just in a whirlwind. So the fact that it's raw and healthy. One of the questions was, do you have a recipe for homemade cream cheese?
So I don't have my own recipe for it. And the recipe that I use, there's a wonderful book by Miyoko Shinner, who actually has a whole line of dairy-free cheeses now available in stores, including a butter that's non-dairy that won all kinds of awards. They even sell it at Trader Joe's. And I would have to grab the book, but it was very easy. It was like a cup of cashews, which you soak and you have the skins off, like they're blanched, or almonds, almonds. And then you added some like dairy-free yogurt. and that was like the probiotic, and you blended it, and I think you left it on the counter for like 8 hours, and that was your cream cheese. It was so, and salt if you use salt, and that's how easy it is to make. Maybe you could get that recipe on her website, but that's how easy it was.
Yeah, no, I hear her new book is actually pretty amazing, and it has a lot of vegan cheeses. Let me just see. Can you list again the two things that you used for the things for the Frappuccino, the Dandy blend, and what was the second one?
Well, it was either or. You wouldn't use both. So you either would use well, there's actually more than this, by the way. There's Pero, there's ones that I haven't tried. But the ones that I have tried, one is called Dandy Blend. I just get that on Amazon. And then the other one, which is new to me, but equally delicious and literally has only 100% brown rice, is from Say Me. I've got some kind of discount code with this company, I'm pretty sure. But this is the company that makes caffeine-free green tea, which is supposed to be very good for you. I just did an interview with her last Thursday, so she's amazing. But this stuff is, and if you're looking for a beverage that tastes like coffee, both of these do.
That's just awesome. I do know a lot of people who use Pero as well. AJ, tell us, why do you take salt, oil, sugar, flour, gluten out of your diet? Tell us.
Because Dr. Furman says so. Dr. Goldhammer says so. Well, okay, so I take it out because it should never have been there in the first place. Because if you think about our ancestors, they really didn't, I don't think they ate it because none of that stuff existed. So, okay, let's start with sugar. There's nothing really good you can say about sugar. Let's just be honest. You know, I know people like it, people are addicted to it. It's a highly processed food. It's about 1,800 calories a pound. It has no fiber. It has no nutrients. It's linked to every single disease process that you can imagine, from tooth decay to cancer to diabetes to obesity. So, like I said, I was obese. I was 50 pounds heavier for over 50 years of my life. It's only the last 10 years that I became slender. And I know that sugar was the reason. I was really a severe sugar addict. I ate a lot of sugar. I started every day with a Coke Slurpee, had a Dr. Pepper for lunch, and ate all kinds of vegan candies, cakes, cookies, pies, and ice cream. And I was fat and I was sick. I had the beginning of colon cancer. So sugar, I don't think, is a friend to anyone unless it's in the form of a whole fruit. And that's how we're supposed to get our sweetness, is from the fruit. So it's addictive. Think of all the people that suffer with food addiction. It's always sugar or sugar and flour or a combination. Sometimes it's alcohol. So it's not good. They've shown in brain scans and MRIs that it lights up the same parts of the brain. And for many people that are susceptible, it's more addictive than cocaine. So it's not a food, especially that should be given to children. There are some people that can get away with eating a little or maybe even a lot and not be overweight or have a disease. But you know, with 3/4 of the people in our country overweight or obese, it's not most people that can eat sugar. And honey is not, it's still a highly concentrated sweetener. It's still calorically dense. It's not vegan. It's from an animal. The bees weren't making it for us. They're making it for them, and we harm them when we take it, even humanely. Their wings get torn off. Honey is basically bee vomit. So sugar is not good if it's in concentrated form. So it doesn't matter if you call it maple syrup, agave, barley malt, molasses, you know, I mean, even, you know, I mean, date syrup is pretty concentrated too. Remember, this is a treat, and don't think for a minute that the first recipe is a weight loss food. It is definitely a treat, but it is just so much better than what you would get, say, at the Cheesecake Factory in terms of health. So, okay, that's sugar. So oil is it's a highly processed food. It's 4,000 calories a pound. It's the most, if you even call it food, it's the most calorically dense food on the planet. You know, I can have 2 pounds of zucchini for the same calories and a tablespoon of olive oil. And people say, well, we need fat. Yeah, we need whole fat like nuts, seeds, and avocado. We don't need processed oils where all the fiber and nutrients are destroyed. And I know Dr. Furman has written extensively about that. He even goes as far to say that, you know, oil causes cancer, breast cancer. So because it causes people to be obese, and when they're overweight and obese, their risk of cancer is much greater. So also, the other problem with oil is people think they like the taste of it, but really what they like is the caloric density, because the more calorically concentrated the calories, the more dopamine is released. And at 4,000 calories a pound, oil makes you feel better than like kale at 100 calories a pound. But again, anytime you process a food, you make it calorie rich and nutrient poor. So olives are about 600 calories a pound. But when you make it into olive oil, you take away the fiber, the water, the vitamins, phytochemicals, antioxidants, and micronutrients, and you're left with this non-nutritive sludge that harms what's called your endothelial lining, which lines your vasculature, which contributes to heart disease. Wonderful book by Dr. Esselstyn, Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, which talks about that. So oil is, see, cow's milk is for calves. Oil is for cars. And then the next one, so flour. I wouldn't say that I never eat flour, but I never eat it like in bread or things like that, because technically when you take the nuts and make them into the crust or the oats, you've technically made a flour. But for the most part, I mean, like when you buy flour, like white flour or wheat flour, it's really stripped of all its nutrition. It's very high glycemic. For people that are susceptible or vulnerable to the effects of refined food addiction, sugar and flour go through the same refining process as drugs and alcohol. And again, caloric density, flour is about 1,500 calories a pound. The whole grain from which it's made was only about 500 calories a pound. And see, whole foods have water and fiber, vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, antioxidants, and micronutrients. Processed foods like sugar and flour are devoid of all of that stuff. So there's no fiber, there's no water, just like animal products have no fiber, no water, and no vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, or micronutrients. So again, so for the first three letters, SOFA, yeah, so for sugar, oil, flour, too high in caloric density, highly processed, not healthy really in any way, contribute to obesity, diabetes, and other diseases, and contribute to people that's with food addictions. So then I have this acronym, SOFAs, sugar, oil, flour, alcohol, salt, because I also tell people to avoid alcohol. Again, not found in nature. None of these are found in nature, sugar, oil, flour, alcohol, and salt, at least not in any concentrated form. You never see, you see an olive bush, but you don't see an olive oil pond, right? And the thing is, alcohol is 7 calories per gram. So if you remember from a high school biology class, protein and carbohydrate are 4 calories a gram, fat is 9 calories a gram. So alcohol's almost twice as calorically dense as protein or carbohydrates. The World Health Organization no longer recommends any amount of alcohol is safe. They say it's linked to every single cancer. And again, I deal with people with addictions and I see the suffering that it causes in lives and families and the death and the destruction. So I don't really have anything good to say about alcohol. Any marginal benefit that might be, say, in red wine from the resveratrol, eat the grape. So the answer is always eat the whole food, not the processed food. Anytime you process a food, you make it calorie rich and nutrient poor. So salt is the hardest one. And I'm not always perfect with salt. It's very hard especially if you eat out, restaurants don't make food without oil or salt, but salt is a very powerful appetite stimulant. You eat more food when you salt your food. The research shows it's about 11% more calories, and those calories generally come from fat. My mentor, Dr. Alan Goldhammer, says sugar, oil, and salt aren't foods. They're chemicals we add to the food that fool our brain satiety mechanism that cause us to overeat. And when we overeat, we become overweight. When we become overweight, we usually get some kind of lifestyle disease that goes along with that. So as extreme as it may sound, basically what I'm recommending is that you eat food the way our ancestors did, that our whole natural food, the way it's found in nature from a plant, not manufactured in a plant. But we eat more sugar, fat, and salt than ever before in human history. And the thing is the processed food industry knew that sugar, fat, and salt were addictive. There's wonderful books that can explain this better than I. One was written by Dr. David Kessler called The End of Overeating. He was the head of the FDA when Bill Clinton was president. And Michael Moss, who's an investigative journalist and Pulitzer Prize winning author, wrote Salt, Sugar, and Fat, How the Food Giants Hooked Us. And in March of this year came out with a follow-up called Hooked. I just don't want to pay a company to addict me to their product. It's like, by the way, the tobacco industry, when it was determined that cigarette smoking was hazardous to your health, and they started putting little warning labels on cigarettes, well, that should be on processed food and animal products, in my opinion. But when they started losing customers from smoking, they bought up all the processed food industry. So they bought up Philip Morris and Kraft. And so I think processed food is pretty evil. And I haven't eaten any in like 13 years. The only thing I buy in a can of, like, obviously this came in a box. So, but you know what I mean, for the most part. For most processed food, the box would be healthier than what's in it because there's probably more fiber. So the idea is to eat your food, in my opinion, exclusively from plants. But whether you are exclusive to plants or not, you don't want to be eating food in a can, a box, a bottle, or a bag. And it's very hard to find any food, let alone processed food or restaurant food, that is not laden with lots of sugar, fat, and salt. And it's difficult for people because they got used to eating a diet high in sugar, fat, and salt. So the kind of food that I recommend at first doesn't taste as good. Well, the cheesecake will taste good no matter what. That does have fat, by the way, because there's fat in cocoa, there's fat in tofu, there's fat in the nuts, but it doesn't have any refined sugar, it doesn't have any salt. But other things, it can take a while for the food to taste good. That's why I do what like Dr. Neil Barnard has always told me. He said, you hit them over the head with dessert, draw them in, and then you serve them the steamed kale.
Awesome. And I know you know this, but one of the questions also dealt with in the processing, what happens with the sweets, the refined, why AJ is talking about refined is because it doesn't have fiber in it. And so dates and some of the other foods do. But I'm really glad you lifted the box of the tofu, because one of the questions was, can you use any other substitute for the cheesecake other than tofu or other than
the only thing I could think of that I know would work without like testing the recipe would be avocado, an equal amount of ripe avocado.
Excellent. And let's see, I'm just combing through the questions again. I think, one more. Can you repeat the name of the company that makes the caffeine-free green tea?
Yes, it's called Say Me, SEIMEE, and I just, if you go to Chef AJ YouTube page, if you just look, last Thursday, Kiyomi is her name, and she did a long talk about the benefits of all her products, and I'm pretty sure I have a discount code like 10%, but I can't remember it right now.
Excellent.
But I've tasted her caffeine. I'm very sensitive to caffeine, so I was very excited when Sharon McRae told me there was a caffeine-free one, and I tried it first thing in the morning on an empty stomach. It did not upset my stomach. Excellent.
And this is a question I should know the answer to, but how does Miyoko Shimmer spell her name?
So yeah, Shinner. Miyoko is Miyoko, and Shinner is Schinner. The book that I got the recipe from for the cream cheese, which you probably can find online, is called Artisan Vegan Cheese. And I'm sure that there's many, many more cream cheese recipe now. But like I said, you can pretty much find non-dairy cream cheese even at the regular grocery store these days.
Yes, I've seen it at many of the grocery stores. I'm just putting it in the chat. Bear with me.
I mean, there's the soy ones that are like Tofuti. There's Kite Hill. There's Miyoko's brand. There's so many now to choose from.
Great. Okay. And awesome. So we have about 5 more minutes. Let's see, what are your favorite meals to suggest when people are just getting started? By the way, I want to mention that AJ's book, The Ultimate Weight Loss Book, she deals pretty head on with food addiction, and it's a marvelous book really for any addiction, but particularly for food addiction. Wow.
This is my favorite food. These are potatoes. I mean, sweet potatoes. So right here we have the regular white, the orange ones that people are used to. These are my very favorite. These are called Hana yam, and these are the Japanese or the murasaki. And this is my favorite thing to eat in the whole world. I eat these every day for lunch, usually with some steamed broccoli. You can eat them roasted, you can eat them mashed, you can eat them steamed, you can cut them into fries and air fry them. You can smash them after they're cooked and air fry them, and they taste like toast. I don't know anybody that doesn't like sweet potatoes. And hey, if it's good enough for the Okinawans who eat something like 92% of their calories from it, it's good enough for me. But most people do like sweet potatoes, or even regular potatoes, Like, I'll show you what Charles is having for dinner. Oh, where'd it go? It's missing. So we knew we were going to be working at this time, and so I wanted to make the dinner in advance. And this is something that he can actually make himself. I learned about this in True North. And regular people like this. You simply take any kind of potato. This happens to be an organic russet, but we could have used any of those sweet potatoes. And we stuff it with an equal mixture of roasted corn. This is the roasted organic corn from Whole Foods, and he's chosen pinto beans tonight. Sometimes he does black beans, and what we're going to put on it is salsa, or he's going to have that. I'm having something else: salsa, guacamole, and some jalapeno peppers. And when we're not having a pandemic, I used to make parties where it would be a potato bar, so people could all stuff whatever they wanted in their potato or sweet potato. And people love customizing their food and having toppings. It's very filling.
Excellent. And since a lot of New Yorkers also go to restaurants, You can usually get a baked potato, often a sweet potato, but really a baked potato at any restaurant, and add your steamed vegetables and some salsa, and it's fantastic. So we have time probably just for a few more. Who is like a noteworthy person who really brought you onto this path of whole food, plant-based, salt, oil, sugar, and flour free?
You know, I mean, all the doctors that came from the NHA, the Natural Hygiene Movement, Dr. Joel Furman, Dr. Alan Goldhammer, Dr. Stefan Esser, I learned so much from all of them, because regular plant-based doctors, often they're oil-free, but they make a lot of exceptions for the sugar and salt, but not Dr. Furman, Dr. Goldhammer, Dr. Esser, Dr. Clapper, you know, those that either at some point worked at True North or went through True North or through the NHA. They're the ones that really inspired me to do this. Actually, also it was Dr. Esselstyn. I remember it was 2008. I had heard him speak in Los Angeles, and he, even though he may not be known for SOS free, just to being oil free, he did say that, and it really made sense to me that if I wanted to live long like my family didn't, because they're pretty much all dead, and avoid all the diseases that my family died from, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, that this would be a way to do it. And so far I'm 61, my sister's 66. We're healthy. We don't have any, you know, few aches and pains, you know, from pickleball, but no discernible diseases, and life is good.
Life is good. Just for the audience, AJ and I met probably, gosh, many years ago. And now we're both at True North, and we're both in our 60s, and blessed, you know, that we're so far so good, in good health, which is reason alone to go whole food, plant-based, to SOS free. Let's see, just as a quick announcement, we at Plant Powered Metro New York, you'll see it in the chat, we're going to be discussing Michael Moss's book, a new book in our book club. And then a couple of plugs just for Chef AJ. I cannot recommend her books highly enough. And every day, 2 o'clock really, New York time, you can find her on Facebook Live. Yes, excellent. Facebook Live, and also on YouTube. She has her own YouTube channel. And if you can't make it at 2, you can always go back. They're always recorded. And she has just some outstanding guests in this field, and also in really whole being lifestyle. So a number of other guests who, you know, recommend sleep and all the other ways that we're encouraged to take care of ourselves. And here's the cheesecake again, chocolate strawberry cheesecake. I've tasted AJ's food. It's absolutely delicious. So I recommend it to all of you. And let's see, any parting questions or comments, AJ? We have 2 minutes.
Well, as much as this is wonderful to eat these treats, I really recommend you eat vegetables first and foremost, especially greens. And, you know, believe it or not, greens really cut your cravings for sugar. So I find when I have greens, I eat them for breakfast every day, even a green juice. I don't crave this stuff so much. So, you know, these are treats. They're still better than the traditional counterpart, but eating vegetables is of prime importance.
Awesome. Great note to end on. Thank you so much. For the audience, if you want to stay on, one of the mentors for both AJ and myself is Dr. Furman, and we have a real treat in the next hour because he'll be here with his daughter, Talia Furman, who also has a new book out called Desserts to Live For. So we're very excited on this holiday of dairy and desserts to present non-dairy desserts for your health. AJ, thank you so much.
Thank you
we'll
so much, guys.
Now, and feel free to join us, either stay on or join us for Dr. Furman. And
I absolutely would love to.
For people who are asking, in fact, AJ, can you send me the recipe for the?
Yes,
and
I absolutely can.
Oh, great. Awesome. We will put it in the follow-up recording to everyone who's on the call. I think we have your email addresses, so Nikki will do that. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for being here. Bye.